Hi guys, so you're watching Hear Me Out, and as you know at Hear Me Out, so Meg, we have a YouTube channel. It's called Hear Me Out, and what we've been basically trying to do is we're just trying to take complex emotions that people in our generation always feel and just try to break it down into something simpler. So Meg is a psychologist, and who better to hear from at Hear Me Out today? So Meg, can you just tell me a little about yourself?
All right. So my name's Meg. I'm a psychologist, as you've already mentioned. So at IDET, I'm a mental health counselor. I take therapy sessions with all kind of clients that are there. So anyone who's struggling with anxiety, depression, grief, self-image issues, body positivity, or something like that. So those are the kind of sessions that I take. If I were to talk about my educational background, so that is with regard to I have done MSc in counseling psychology. So my approach to therapy is more of person-centered therapy, where I like to put the person, the client who is coming in between. That my therapy space should be for this person. Other than that, the modalities that I adhere to are related to Gestalt, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, a little bit of SFPT as well, that is solution focused brief therapy.
That's a lot of things in one go, but that's
Yeah.
nice. So, like, I would just like to say you mentioned a lot of big words right now, right? Like anxiety, depression, ACD, PCD. I lost you with some of the letters, but I just want to know, like, there's a lot of conversation that parents have and we have that, like when we say, oh, I have anxiety, parents are like, oh, but it didn't exist back in the day. It's a very new thing. But obviously, even most of the parents who are learning and unlearning today, and even we know that it's not like it did not exist. People didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But I recently watched like a video yesterday, and I realized it was basically talking about how today's generation, not even as a generation, but all human beings together, are suddenly processing so much information that nobody, I don't think any generation has ever had to process so many things at one time. Like we're thinking about war, we're thinking about different bodies on the internet, we're comparing so many things. So do you think that's the reason it's become so prominent today, or it's just the awareness of it?
I wouldn't say it's one or the other. I think it's both of them combined for me. In my personal opinion, of course, because there is so much that you have to process first of all.
Yeah.
Right? As you said, like war is going on. No one thought like 10, 20 years ago that we'll have to process through a war that is going on, where you feel so out of control as well, that you know there are certain things that are happening in different part of the world, and I'm just sitting here going through these emotions and I don't know what to do with them. Right. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it, as you mentioned, that there's so much awareness now. There's so much also space for people to talk about this. Right. Before, when you say like our parents, right? Anxiety did exist before.
Yeah,
But
it's like
yeah.
you cannot tell me it just didn't happen. You just didn't know you were going
Yes,
through it.
right. You might have named it something else. You know, that label, if we were to say it, wasn't there, that this is anxiety and this is how you can process through it. Maybe it was something else that you were naming it as at that point of time. So I think that self awareness being there and how much we need to process comes into play together to, you know, be where we are right
Yeah.
now. So, yeah.
And like, since we're talking about parents, like a lot of my friends or just people that have been to therapy or have people who want to go or, and aren't going or have been and stopped, they all have a very similar thing to say where they feel like they are taking therapy and they talk about, family and things like that. And in the end, they're like, I am doing my part to help myself, but I feel like my parents also need therapy. So if they don't therapize, what am I going to do solving my issues? So, like, what do you think? Like, do you think like you can like only if you solve your own problem you're solving a part of the problem, or you have it has to be a two-way street for like action?
That's a very important question to ask ourselves, and very relevant at this point of time. Because even in my sessions, right, when I am working with a 23-year-old, right, and they say that these are the concerns that I had at home, and we, go into childhood, and that's why this is happening right now, right? There's a limitation to how much a single person can help you. Right? Is it?
Yeah.
Do you want water?
No, no, no.
Okay. So there's so much that a single person can contribute in, the family situation. So it's always going to be a limitation for the therapist as well, because I have been sitting in sessions and listening to, okay, what the parents have been doing. Even after my client has made so much progress, I'm just like, please
Somebody
let
help
me.
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like and there have been times when I've also told them that would your parents be open to
Yeah.
counseling? Can we also talk about the fact that maybe your parents can come into counseling, not as a couple or as a parent, maybe individually as well, because there are a lot of things that our previous generation has not processed at all.
Yeah,
And
like honestly, when I'm asking you this question, no offense to my parents or anybody's parents, because they are also doing this for the first
Yeah.
time, right? But how do you get like any 17, 20-year old, like for them to communicate to their parent that maybe you also need to join me in this on
Yeah.
this couch is such a difficult thing to navigate. Well, how do you?
Yeah.
What would you say that you would tell a child to like make their parents
Yes.
understand that it's just good for both of us?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things that we need to start off with is making your parents observe what is going wrong. Instead of just straight away saying, like, you need counseling, right?
Yeah.
You need to start off with that dialogue with them that, when you do this is how it's affecting me. If you're comfortable with sharing to them that I am going through therapy as well, I am taking an example of an 18 plus that does not have to take consent from parents, right? Tell them how therapy has been helping you itself. Start that dialogue with them that how it can be helpful for them later on. It can't be that for the first two, three conversations you tell them that, this is how therapy can be helpful, this is what my therapist said. That's going to be like an attack for them, because therapy as it is seen as a luxury. It's not seen as something that you need to do, especially when you're facing certain obstacles or you're not able to process through certain things, right? So I think starting off with a very comfortable discussion about these things, when you do this is how it's affecting me. Maybe you can bring in examples of how it's affecting other people in the house as well. And it is, I will agree with you, very tricky situation, because I have gone through that myself on a personal level as well, let alone as a therapist to a client. So it will take a lot of tries, right? But if there is a little bit of change in the parent, I think we see it as a win, because that little bit of change will increase, or I would say actually decrease their resistance to changing themselves.
I think even the parent just taking the step or like just opening their mind to even trying it itself makes such a big difference in the equation itself. Like, full fun fact, guys, like me and my mom tried doing a couple session once and it was better than anything I could have done. Like we just realized that we have the same problems against each other. So the minute it's out, your 90% problem I think is automatically solved. So that makes a huge difference.
Especially like when you are sitting with the parent and talking about, okay, what's going on in your life, right? That is not a conversation Indian households have.
Yeah.
It's the other way around. The parent is asking, okay, what is going on in the child's life? The child is very guarded. I mean, like, no, this only happened. 2 3 word
Everything
answers.
is fine only.
Yeah, that kind of answer. So I think when we change that and be like, okay, what is going on in your life, right? Can we talk about that? I think it opens your horizon to seeing your parent as an individual, yeah, as a human, rather than just, this is my mother or this is my father.
Yeah.
That's all the role that they play. So I think that's also very important.
Yeah. And like to be honest, when I finished college, I really wanted to do like become a psychologist. I thought I'm really bad at a lot of things, but if there's anything I understand, it's humans. I don't know. I thought I was the smartest person alive. Things that I understand human emotions. But I also realized my biggest drawback is I'm someone that's really emotional. Like I can get attached. Like I care about people's problem more than my own problems. That's probably my own different therapy session for later. But I was like, maybe I cannot do this because it's so difficult to disassociate from a client's problem. How do you tend to manage that?
That's a very good question. And initially, it's very difficult for sure, because For me as well, in my personal experiences, the first few months of starting with taking sessions, it would be like I am out of session, but I'm walking down a road and I'm thinking of what is going on in this
Exactly.
person's life, right? But I think supervision helps out a lot within that,
Absolutely.
where you have a supervisor for yourself, right? Where you feel like if I'm not able to detach myself from my client, okay, there's something going on inside. Of course, there's that emotional. Some people are more emotionally intelligent, are able to connect more emotionally with other people. But within therapy itself, there might be some clients that you might be more emotionally connected with because you see some parts of yourself in them, right? You're able to resonate with them. So I think talking to a supervisor about those parts for yourself are those that unhealed parts that is making you feel more connected to this
So
person.
basically, as a therapist, you also have your own unsaid therapist to keep you in check. Is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
And especially you have a therapist actually.
Are all therapists also required to take ongoing therapy?
Yes.
Oh, that's
I,
crazy.
it's not. It's an ethical practice. It's not a law in
Oh.
sense that you have to take. But from where I studied, we were very much encouraged that it's compulsory for you to like take 10 therapy sessions at least in the span of your training. And I think that was the best thing that they made us do, because within therapy, right? When you're in a session, your client will hold a mirror in front of you. You can't escape yourself, right? That 1 hour when you're sitting in front of the client, everything that is going on inside you, you can't ignore, right? So, for you to be able to be there 100% for your client, you need to work upon yourself.
Yeah.
So, that's why therapy is there. You have your own therapist. That's why supervisor is there. Supervisor is much more in the sense of like the theoretical part of thing, but therapy is more on the personal front, right? That I do not want my own personal biases or my own personal unhealed parts to show up in therapy and create this space as an uncomfortable space for the client.
Yeah, like it must be so hard when your client is saying something and you can't be like, oh yeah, I relate. Like
Yes.
you have to be like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel? So we were speaking about how a therapist tries to detach from their clients in therapy, but there's also the opposite spectrum of it where one has to find the right therapist for them itself, right? So actually, I was sitting in the waiting room here today before we could start shooting, and I met a client, and she was so like full of life. Like I didn't even know she was a client, and she's like, I've been coming here for 3 years, and my therapist, I was with her for 2 years, and she left, and after that, I was pretty hesitant to do it, but she said it actually went really well. But not everybody's lucky enough to have that experience. Like for example, my first therapy session in life, I was really young, and I hated it. I was like, this person is giving me sympathy. Like I don't want your sympathy. I just want you to either hear me out or give me solution. Now I didn't know back then that a therapist is not supposed to give you solution, right? So what would you say? Like how does one understand that what sort of therapist works or does not work for them?
I think one of the greatest thing over here is to realize what you actually need from therapist. Is it a solution? Is it support? Is it someone that you just want to be there and listen to you, whatever is going on, right? That is with the layperson perspective of how things can be. But if I go one step ahead, I think one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself is before you book a session or before you get into a session as well, some therapists will offer you intake calls. Okay, so an intake call is a 20-minute call where you get on call with the therapist and you let them know that, these are the things that I'm struggling with. All right, what would be your approach to it? So, just understanding how the therapist works and creating notes for yourself. Do you think you will be comfortable with this? I think that is the only thing that you need to realize during that time. If you have more knowledge about therapeutic approaches, or even if you just Google them, all right, take that initiative to ask the therapist are you trained in this? Do you think this thing will help me out? I've read this somewhere. I think with iDare as well, we are able to get on a call with them and have a conversation with them about what would be the right fit for them over here as well. So I think that 120-minute call or 30-minute call, however much time it takes, is very important for us to realize before we commit, right? Because it's a scary thing to sit in a session and be vulnerable in front of therapists, right? So be more aware of what is required for you, because especially for a therapist, it might not be the case that every therapist will work for you, as you said, right? For you, there were certain traits that the therapist showed that were like, I don't need this at this point of time. This is not required for me. But maybe for another person, that is what was required. So I think finding that right therapist client fit for yourself by being more aware, by taking that initiative of asking the questions that are required, I think would be helpful in that process.
Yeah, so that's what happens to most people. Like they take a first session, and for whatever reason, maybe the first session with that one person did not work for them. So that they just like they drain and discard the whole idea of therapy as a whole because one thing didn't work for them. It's like I have one horrible toxic boyfriend, and suddenly I hate love for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So would you encourage people to tell them that like any other equation, a therapist is also a trial and error till you actually find something that works for you, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, some people have to go through a lot of trial and error. Unfortunately, some people get it in the first go itself. But yeah, as you said, that, I think one of the cases that I would like to bring in here is that I had this one client who said that, I've gone through therapists, so many therapists, I've tried so much, all right, and now I just feel like I don't want to get into therapy at all. And I think one of the things that helped during that time for this client is letting them know, now that you've gone through so many therapists, you know what is something that you don't want in a therapist and what is something you want in a therapist as well. So you're like much more knowledgeable and confident with rejecting or accepting a therapist.
This is like dating advice.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah, questionable, but yeah, kind of agreement.
I mean, not crossing the borderline boundaries here, but
yes, that's with all relationships, right?
Yeah.
Every interpersonal relationship, and that is required within therapy. Like you need to have that trust with your therapist because you're gonna be your most vulnerable with them in that 1 hour. So that is there.
So with that thought, like what I feel is like the most dreading part that comes with that experience is, like personally, I'll speak for myself. I'm open to trying. Like I do a session with you, it doesn't work, sure, I'll try again. But now when I'm thinking, like right now I'm thinking about, okay, now maybe I should start doing sessions again. And I'm new to Bangalore, it's a new life here. I've done it before back home. But now I'm like, if I start all over again, sure, maybe the problems I'm facing right now are different from the problems like
you were facing before.
Like, yeah, 3-year-old past Madhura was feeling compared to today, right? But it's like, obviously the problems I'm facing right now are also arising from a certain past issue which I've already unloaded to another therapist. Now again, when I do start again, I'll have to start fresh, tell them every past issue. It's going to come up again. It's like I said, it's like dating. Like you have to again find out your favorite color. Again, you're like, do you like mountains or beaches? It's like going through the same cycle again. So how does a therapist navigate to getting to that space with the client where they cover up that gap?
I have a very, I would say, interesting example over here. I had a client who came in with an Excel sheet that had everything written down because she was so tired of explaining to a new therapist again and again. So she had made an Excel sheet, okay? But that is within an extreme case where she was so tired of, going through everything, as you said. But one of the things that can help you out is stay in contact with your previous therapist and let them know, can we do case transfer? So case transfer is something that, your previous therapist can give out certain case notes from your previous therapy sessions so that your new therapist will have some idea of what you have gone through, what your process was like as well.
Oh, so you all are exchanging notes also.
Yeah, but
there's no privacy.
That is with consent. If you feel like, if I get my current therapist in contact with my previous therapist, and if he or she has a little bit of idea of what I've gone through before, because I don't want to get into that story again, then you can do that. But it's always going to be with consent. Confidentiality is of the utmost importance for therapists. So it's always going to be with consent. Other than that, I feel like if you don't feel comfortable, that I don't want these two therapists to meet
talk
at
to
all,
each other.
right? So if you feel that way, I think you need to state it out in the therapy session that I'm very tired of, repeating my story again and again, because there are other modalities as well other than the traditional talk therapy, right? Maybe you can draw it out, maybe you can dance it out. I'm just saying it out there. Okay?
But that's true. Like
Yeah.
nowadays, there's so much of movement therapy,
Yes.
art therapy, and I'm somebody that loves like art. Like if somebody
Hmm.
just allowed me to sit and draw,
Yeah.
that automatically makes me feel better. So would you say that these sort of like different forms of therapy can be a substitute to just speaking therapy, or do you have to unload your emotions to eventually feel better?
I think it's very subjective, alright, but I wouldn't say for some people it can be a substitute, alright, but I think with traditional talk therapy there is much more expression that sometimes maybe art therapy can't bring in. Or, even with dance therapy as well. It depends on what is required for the client, right? So I think that subjectivity is always going to be there when we talk about which therapy approach will be helpful.
So maybe it could always be like a bonus. Like I'm doing
Yes.
therapy, but today I don't feel like talking, so I can just. That's nice.
Yeah.
So, like while you were talking, I also wanted to I wanted to throw some very common, myths about therapy and mental health. I'm not going to give you a whole list, but while we're going, you said a few things, so two came up to my head, and I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned a client that came up with an Excel sheet, but it's a very common thing that people think that if you, if you, if you can get out of bed and if you can go to work and if you can get through your day, that means there's nothing wrong with you. Like you don't need therapy, but I don't think people realize that there's also something called as a very functional depressed person or a functional anxious person, right? So could you just let me also educate me a little on it and the other people, so that you don't have to be a bedrotten vegetable to feel the need to get to.
Yeah, I think when we talk about depression or when we talk about anxiety, there's more self awareness about how it shows, but there's also that awareness of how it shows in the textbook way, right? And when we talk about functional depression or functional anxiety, we're talking about how it might be in its natural form itself, because that is the worst case scenario, right? That you're rotting in bed the whole day and you feel these depressive moods that are kicking in for you. But when you see in real life, that's not the case. You can't bed rot the whole week, right? You might have a job, you might have classes to go to, or you have to contribute at home as well. So it's mostly about functional depression or functional anxiety is you're doing everything that you're doing, but it takes like 100% more effort than what it would have if these thoughts wouldn't have been there. Like it takes so much more from you, right, that it just drains you so much. So I think that explains a bit more on how the functionality is there, but inside you just feel so drained, right?
Yeah. So with that, like there are two things that usually happen. Like in therapy, I don't know if it's a common therapy practice. It's just something that I've experienced. What a therapist usually tends to do is encourage a routine to an individual, right? It's a very, and I understand why, because the moment you have at least one, like 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock routine fixed, you have purpose through your day, correct? But what I was also wanting to understand is like again, there are functional people. So if people are following a routine, is that enough for them to feel like, okay, my life is together and I'm good? Like because I feel like anytime I go to therapy, I'm going to be forced into a routine. So does having a routine in itself make me a better, deserving individual? Like I don't get it.
I think a routine can provide a platform for you, right? That if I was here before the routine, now I'm here, right? But for me to grow from here, I need certain other things, which can be professional support or it can be certain other things that is required for you to move from a functional depression to actually just being a functional person itself, if I were to use that. So a routine will help you to get from here to here, but from here to here, you need certain other things. So does that answer it?
Yeah, but for a person with like a functional depression or functional anxiety, they already have a routine, right? They're just not deriving happiness from going through that routine.
Yeah.
So what is their step to feel better?
So when you say that they already have a routine, right? It's a forced routine, first of all. So it is they're never gonna derive any happiness from it. Right? So what is required for them at that point of time is to look at the origin of this. Like, why is the anxiety there? Why is the depression symptoms there? Right? So all of these symptoms, where are they originating from? The routine itself is not going to be helpful. It just helps you to move around, right? And go about your day. Right. But that is just like one tiny part of the healing process, right? There are other parts to it. So that's when within professional help, what we are trying to do with these clients is that, try to see where these symptoms are originating from, what are their coping mechanism to them at this point of time, are they unhealthy? Most of the times they are, that's why it's leading to this, can be substituted to healthy coping mechanisms as well. Right, so there are more complexities to it than just saying like go follow a routine. That's not gonna be helpful at all. So yeah.
So, like, based on all the things you said, I would like to just segue a little bit into men and like men's mental health, because I don't know what their deal is. I don't know why they think they don't need it, because we all know they kind of do need it, and we all really need it. So the thing with men is nowadays I've been hearing a lot of men say this, that some of them have even tried therapy and they feel like they don't need it. They would might as well just go to the gym. And it sounds funny, but I think for them it makes sense, because they're like I'm going to go try and talk about my emotions, but they're like, for me it doesn't this thing. So when I'm at gym, I'm using my energy into that, I'm letting it out, which is the same equivalent, like we say for a girl or for people, we say have a routine. So these men are alternating it with the gym, but like we said, isn't it also necessary for them to like speak their feelings instead of just gymming? Because at the end of the day, you have to let your emotions out somewhere. You cannot channel it into physical energy at all times, right?
That's very true, because with men, we have seen a rise of, if something is not going good mentally, I'm going to fix it physically only by going to the gym. I have a routine of going to the gym, and it helps to a certain extent, is what I would like to add after that. Right? Because there is dopamine getting released, there is serotonin getting released, all of these biological processes are going on. Right? So for the next 1 or 2 hours, I feel better. Right? But what happens after that? Right, no one is talking about that after those 1 or 2 hours of being in the gym and having that high of physically working out, that after those hours is what they need, right? And as you said, that for them talking out their feelings is very difficult. However, I've seen a change when they get that environment where they feel safe, where they feel that there's no judgment for me to say out loud what I'm feeling, say out loud that I'm sad today, say out loud that I feel disappointed in you, right? It's more of like I'm angry. That's it, right? That's what used to happen.
And
before.
I feel like they equate all their emotions to anger. Yes. Even they could be really sad and they'll just say, "Oh, I'm angry," because they feel like it's the most manliest emotion to feel. Unfortunately,
I think that's a very good point that you also brought in, that these manly emotions, right? We always equate anger to being manly, assertive,
crying to be woman like,
right? So we always need to be proper, is what a man feels, that I need to be the providing kind, right? So all of these like cultural norms that limit them to express themselves, I think there's a change that is happening that I see in the therapy room. I'm not saying it's a huge change, but a little change also goes a long way, is what I feel. And I think creating a safe environment in your own friendship group for men is very much required, because right now when I talk to my male friends or I talk to the clients as well that come in, they'll be like, with you I can talk about these things, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't feel that judgment. I don't feel if I say that, I was very sad, I was crying, then no one's gonna make fun of me here. No one's gonna say you're like weak or you're coward for not dealing.
But it's so sad that they think it's women who are thinking that they are going to be weak if they cry.
Yeah.
I'm like, please cry. Show me that you cry. Like you're human and I
Yes.
want to see you cry.
Yeah.
But it's honestly just a man on man thing. Like, it's not a woman created thing, and it's sad that they've made it for themselves that they have to have their muscles flexed and smiles worn at all times.
Yeah.
Like, with that, like, I have a really, really close friend. If you can crack this case study,
Yes.
Mehak, you are mine. So,
All right,
so
let's go.
this friend of mine, he's very open to the idea of therapy. It's not like he's someone like, oh, what is this shit? Like, I have no emotions. No, he's very aware. And if I may diagnose myself, I think he has somewhat of like health anxiety. Like, he's very panicked about his health. He'll check his BP and things like that. And I've always told him that, why don't you just take therapy? Like, I started taking therapy right outside his house, that if he sees me go, maybe he'll go. But he's like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I can have a female therapist. I'm like, why? He's like, because what if I get attached? What if I catch feelings? Because he's like, I keep two balls to the closest person with me. So if I'm opening up so much to someone, I'm so scared of getting attached. And I'm like, then you should try a male therapist, because I'm like, I've heard even for girls sometimes a male therapist works better because it's like an opposite perspective for them. It's like a practical approach. So I'm like, why don't you try a male therapist? But then he's like, with a male therapist, I don't know how, if I can even open up that much in front of a man. So it's so sad. Like, for a woman, you're scared to get attached, and in front of a man, you don't know how to open up. So like, what would you say to someone like that to convince them that it's okay to just start? Yeah.
All right. I think with a female therapist, what we really need to understand within this case study is that attachment style that this person has. So it's more of a fearful avoidant style, right? Insecure attachment style, if you were to say, right? There are times when it happens, when you come into therapy, you get attached to your therapist, and you're like, this is the only person that understands me. And you start putting in new feelings towards this person. We have a term for it called transference, right? It will happen more often than we would like as well, right? But I think one of the greatest things that it gives us is a platform to talk about your attachment style, right? And how you navigate through it as well. Because within the therapy space, at least you'll have a safe environment, a non judgmental environment where you are able to realize, okay, what kind of attachment do I have to my therapist at this point of time? How can I navigate it? If it is healthy, how can I shift it into my real life? Right? Instead of just putting it onto my therapist, how can I imitate this attachment style towards my real life itself? Right? That is one thing that a therapist can really help them out with, because there's going to be trust, right? There's going to be confidentiality as well. There's going to be that respect of their autonomy as well. There. So there's no scary situation that they can end up in if we explore that, right? The second thing that you mentioned was with regard to male therapists. What was the main concern with them, with the male therapists?
That man to man, it's difficult to feel that environment of being able to open up.
Okay. So I think one of the things that we can talk about over there is the uncomfortableness that they feel with, talking to a man about their feelings, right? Because that will bring in, okay, which are these environments in your real life or, in your daily life that makes you think it's unsafe to talk, right? So starting with that dialogue with your therapist can be really helpful for them.
So you while we were while we were speaking, you mentioned something about confidentiality. So just for everyone out there, like, a lot of kids sometimes hesitate to get into therapy thinking I cannot tell my therapist this, they'll tell my parents. I cannot tell my therapist this, I'll fall into trouble. So, can you just brief us on how the concept of confidentiality works in therapy? So, some of us are less scared and actually take a step without the fear of, oh, she'll tell my mother or something.
Yeah. I think there's also the difference of having a good therapist and a bad therapist, because I have heard experiences of people being like, I went into therapy being an adult, 18 plus or something, and they went back to my parents because they had contact of my parents or something like that. I think that is a bad therapist, okay? Until and unless there is some kind of harm that the person states, the client states to themselves or to someone else, right? We cannot go ahead and, what is it called?
Break confidentiality.
Yeah, there's a word for it, but yeah, break confidentiality.
That's what I'm going to understand. That's what they're going to understand.
Yes. So you're not supposed to break confidentiality until and unless it's required by law, or the other two things that I just said, right?
But even when it comes to law, it will only happen to a point when it's affecting harmful the person themselves or someone around them, right? It's not something you'll directly take.
If a judge gives the
No, I'm saying something as small as, let's say, some teenager is dealing with consumption. It's not something you're going to report to law because that kid is opening up to you about it. Right?
Yes. So that is never going to be the case. Right. And with regard to confidentiality as well, if we talk about minors, of course, you have to take consent from parents before the minor can start with the therapy sessions. All right. But it is a tricky place to go ahead with confidentiality when minors are present, because there are going to be certain times when you have to tell the parents that, okay, this is something that can cause harm, right? But we would prefer, like, or for me, I can say personally as well, I would prefer to have that conversation with my client, that is the minor, right? First, before I go to the parent, all right? So that he or she knows that, this is why I'm doing it. I'm not just doing it out of the fun of, getting them punished for this, right? I'm coming from a place of care, because I see if you continue with this behavior long term basis, it's going to be very harmful for you. So I think having that conversation with the client um, reinstates their autonomy with the process itself, right? So I think that is very important.
And it is so important so that the child in it itself feels safe to open up to you, knowing that you won't cross that line with them.
Yeah, building that trust, if you were to say, right? Confidentiality helps with a lot in that.
What's a normal behavior that most people do on a daily basis, but that actually reveals like a psychological pattern that they're actually unaware of? Like something very daily activity, generic thing that we do, but we don't realize it's just like you would look at me, I'm doing it, and you'll be like taking notes.
I think there's no off button for therapists for sure, but we learn to ignore that voice that comes in that this behavior means this.
Okay.
So for me, I would say one of the greatest things that happens is I'm very prone to looking at the kind of behavior where in a group setting people demand attention, like I have not been talked to for like 2 minutes, so everyone needs to talk to me. So
I've been diagnosing that lately around me a lot.
I think that comes up a lot for me in group settings, and I go back into childhood, may something happened, that's why this is coming.
But sorry, I get.
Yes.
My brain thinks of questions when you're speaking. Like what you just said, don't you feel like I lost my train of thought?
It's okay.
What did you say?
That I look at people that demand attention.
Yeah.
It's okay, take a
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Okay, can you tell us more about one part is the tension. Like, are there other traits like biting nail, tapping toes?
Yeah.
And something that is.
I think playing with your rings. if you would have noticed, like throughout the podcast as well, I kept playing. Like there are certain times when there's the nervous energy,
Restless energy.
restlessness that we have to sit at one place.
You have no idea how much you can ask both of them too. I'm always like fiddling with my hand and my palms are sweating, but I'm holding it so cool and collected right
Yeah.
now. Which also reminds me of my question. So, like you said, since you're able to rationalize the other person's feelings so much, like since I think that comes from empathy, but as a therapist you're naturally empathetic, right?
Trained to do it.
Yeah, so
actually.
isn't it difficult for you because anything that someone in front of you does to you or in general, you can always justify their behavior?
Yes, it's the worst.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
even for me, I feel like because it comes from empathy, I can anything that the samne wala is doing, I'm like, yeah, they are doing it because of this. So no matter how I feel, it doesn't matter because now it's justified.
Yeah.
So how do you draw that thing for yourself?
It's,
in your
it's
personal
very
equations?
difficult. It's very difficult to do because there are certain times when I'm just thinking I want to throw a tantrum as well.
Yeah, like I want to be pissed just because I understand why you're doing it doesn't mean I'm not
Yeah.
allowed to be pissed at him.
I think one of the greatest things that helps you is having a very good support system around you when you're a therapist, because these are the people that are going to give you the space and be like, no, call out on us when we are doing this thing, and you have the right to say, to be angry with us, right? Because there are certain people that you can have in your life that are going to be like, I'm not going to allow you because now you have that rational, right? So I'm going to use that and be like, you can't be angry with me because I am doing this,
Yeah.
right? But a good support system is going to be like, why I'm doing this, you have that rational, but you can still show that emotion to me. I'm okay with accepting that emotion as well.
Since we're just moving to the end of this conversation, just some last questions I want to ask you. I'm sure you've spoken to a lot of clients over your time as a therapist, and I'm sure most of them are like young individuals in their 20s or 18 to 30. Are there nowadays? Is there a very common pattern problem that people are facing, and why do you think that is? Like, are people going through a very similar feeling nowadays, like common feeling?
I think one of the most common feeling what we discussed during the start of the podcast is having so much information, right? That makes it feel like wherever I am is not the correct place for me. Like maybe I need to be 2 steps ahead. Maybe this person is doing this, so I need to, explore this option. Or I have seen someone else do this, so I need to explore this option. So there's a lot of confusion on, wherever I am, is it okay for me to be there? So I think that is something that I've seen a lot in the clients that I've seen right now.
Yeah, so if like for all of us that are stuck in this internet world of comparing ourselves, if you could just tell one thing to everybody who were just hesitating to take the first step towards therapy, what would you tell them?
I think the first step towards therapy. Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Just
I
I was just trying to ask you what would you say to people who are dealing with the same problem but not taking the first step towards taking therapy now?
Oh, okay. So, with regard to taking the first step towards therapy, I think the most important thing is when that question arises, that's your gut telling you that you need some professional help. If you feel stuck, you know how some people say that, if I can just talk to a friend, that helps, right? Momentarily, it helps. But for the long term process, if you still feel stuck after talking to your friend, you go home, all right, next day you wake up and it's the same, right? That is when you need therapy. You need to take that first step to realize what obstacles you're facing. If you're not able to realize it, also the therapist will help you. We are here to set these goals with you. We're not going to be on a pedestal and be like, we know everything, just listen to us.
Yeah, it's not I'm going to be fine in 30-day challenge.
Yes. It's going to be a journey for sure, but I would say it is a brave step to take that first step, and it's going to take a lot of courage as well. But once you take it, at least you know that there's going to be another person guiding you through it. Like I always say this, therapy is like, there are these things that therapist gives you advice, give you solution or whatever. But I see it as a way of, if you're driving a car, the therapist is going to be in the passenger side and they're going to hold a map for you to guide you through. But you are always going to be the person who's driving the car. You're going to have the steering wheel in your hand. So that's how therapy can help you out. At least you'll have a person within the journey for you. You're not going to be directionless throughout it.
It's like a clutch, basically, that anybody can use.
Yes.
I wanted to, towards the end of this podcast, I wanted to break some common, myths and notions about therapy, but, the conversation has been so great that while speaking only, I've been bashing half of them. But like you mentioned, I'll ask you a first one.
Yeah.
One very common myth that people think about therapy is only for people that are fully actually think they're broken.
A very common misconception that you need to go see a therapist when things hit the roof, right? But therapy isn't just about, when you have a serious problem, only then you go for therapy. It can also be for holistic growth as well. You feel that, I need to improve on myself. There might not be a concern that is coming through, but I just want to grow as a person.
Yeah, I fully believe a person who's fine doing a job is getting things done can also go to therapy just to, debrief, process their thoughts, and it's completely normal.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I just think too.
Yeah.
2 more minutes and then I think we're done.
Okay, so the next one is therapists always have an answer or solution ready in the moment.
Oh no. You don't know what is happening here. There's so much chaos when you're in therapy session. There are going to be times when we don't also have an answer. There are so many complex cases, so many complex experiences that you hear where you're just sitting stunned. And at that point of time, it's okay to tell your client, can we take a moment? I think that's a very powerful statement as well, because that helps your client to also realize that, whatever I've went through, it's intense. I don't have to normalize it. It's okay for me to feel the way that I'm feeling. So I think that also happens.
And we nowadays have gotten crazy about trying to normalize everything.
Yes.
It needs to stop.
Yeah.
Normalize not normalizing everything. If my the next one would be, if I'm not being completely honest in therapy, it's fine, they can figure it out. I've realized this. A lot of people think they can either lie their way into therapy to actually diagnose themselves into something, or lie their way out to completely undiagnose themselves from something.
Okay. I am really grateful none of my clients to know I've done this. But I would say with therapists, they know when you're lying. Okay, because that intuition is there with the training that we've done, with the kind of answers that you're going to give to us when we ask certain kind of questions, right? There is that intuition that comes in that, okay, something is not fitting in when they say certain things. So your therapist will mostly know when you're lying. And depending on which stage you're in therapy, they will confront you one way or the other about it.
Hi, I'm Madhura.
Hi, I'm Mehak.
And this conversation for me, honestly, has been nothing less than therapy. So thank you so much, Mehak.
You're welcome. So if you or anyone who you know that needs certain kind of professional help, IDER can be there for you. We provide certain kind of support where you can come in for us free of cost for chats and calls. We also have Engage where you can come and take counseling sessions at very affordable prices, and we can help you out over there.
Thank you.